Good morning. Welcome, the Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe is always the man that starts the show. We have Bobby Gray coming on. He's going to be doing several hours of radio with us, but our technical way of bringing Joe onto the air is needing a reboot. So I'm bringing us in, and Joe is going to join us very momentarily. But everyone knows what this show is, 800-951-0592. That's the phone number you call to order gold and silver from the Patriot Trading Group. Been doing it almost 30 years, and it's how we keep our listeners and our customers safe in their savings in metals. Joe and I have talked day after day after day about gold and silver. I've always looked at it as savings, not really investment. And today we get to bring something that is investment, and we're super proud and happy to be doing this because Joe and I are fully signed on. Joe, go ahead. We can introduce Bobby Gray and get this thing going.
Yeah, thank you guys. Sorry, you know how it is. Always on these big days, something has to go wrong. So I had to do a quick reboot. But we're ready to go here. We're super excited to have Bobby with us, the founder of TXT that we've been talking about for the last several weeks. First, Bobby, thank you so much. I know how busy you are to dedicate this time and really educate all of us, not just on TXT, but crypto in general and the landscape and really the path that you see TXT taking.
Well, that's a lot right there. There's a lot to unpack. We didn't even get into like the introduction part. So Bobby Gray, founder of TEXTITcoin. Very proud and glad to be here with you this morning. Thanks so much for the invite. I'm glad we've got such a long format because there is a lot to talk about. I'm sure there are a ton of questions out there. Most of them are good and important because, look, crypto is weird. Crypto's scary. Crypto is full of scams. And there's a lot to understand before you take that leap of faith and finally get involved. So we can break your last question down into the next 3 hours of conversation as we dive into crypto, TEXTITcoin, and the future of money, all things digital.
Let's start with how you got into the space to begin with, Bobby. What led you down this path?
Well, I've always been really passionate about money. And when I was young, that was, finding it, getting it, making it, having more of it. When you come from nothing and you realize that, working hard and following what they tell you is supposed to be the American dream doesn't always work out, then you go on like a journey to figure out what's wrong. And what I found in 2007 is that at the root of every injustice that I came across in my search, it was always the same thing. It was always money. And, when you're passionate about money and you realize that the dollar that we have is not quite as federal as they lead us to believe, it orients you in a particular direction of needing to figure out what it really is, where it comes from. And money is so commonplace in our civilization that we very rarely stop to think about what it is, how it works, who makes it, who gets it, all that stuff. And so in 2007, I came across a couple of resources. I'll name them if you like. But American Freedom to Fascism was a great movie that I watched back in the day, a documentary about guys that were on a journey to figure out if there was a actual law requiring a normal American to pay a federal income tax. And of course, as you go through that experience, you learn about, the Federal Reserve, you learn about guys like Ron Paul that have dedicated their lives to, identifying and cleaning up government corruption. And eventually, once you go deep enough down that rabbit hole, you find a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island that really deeply outlines the history of the American Federal Reserve System and how it's the third central bank that we've got here in our country, and how it was created quite surreptitiously by a small group of the world's most powerful men who traveled in secret to Jekyll Island, Georgia, where they crafted, what has become the Federal Reserve Act. And so that was the beginning of the journey for me. And when I put the pieces together, it was very clear and apparent that there weren't enough people out there trying to fix the money. And I said, that's what I got to do. I got to be involved in that, because I think most people don't understand how fraudulent our money system is. I think most people don't understand that this silent tax of inflation is really causing us to have to work harder every day and get less for it every day. And the only thing that I found that was out there that was doing something about the money problem was this thing called the Liberty Dollar. Have you guys heard of the Liberty Dollar before?
Oh, yeah. Very familiar with the Liberty Dollar.
Yeah, that came out in 1998 from a guy named Bernard Van Nothis. And he and I met and connected very briefly because he was making his own money. He started his own private voluntary barter currency, and it was generally successful. The problem is that he got arrested, had the door kicked in on him, and that happened just moments after we met, in like a couple days after we met for the first time. And I thought that he was onto something really great, but not doing it exactly the right way. And so when I saw what I could improve on the platform that he started, that's when I launched the American Open Currency Standard in 2008, where I started doing something very similar to the Liberty Dollar with three real key differences. One is that I was making my coins look very unique. Two is I wasn't calling them dollars. And three is that I wasn't trying to spend them places where you'd spend U.S. currency.
We're up on the break. We got so much to cover. We're going to be right back with Bobby Gray, TEXTITcoin, free money. That's what he's all about. We'll be back. We're back here, Joe and Jason, along with our guest, Bobby Gray. Before we get back to Bobby, very quickly, the markets are mixed right now. The Dow is up 40. The S&P is unchanged. The Nasdaq's down 70 points. The 10-year note at 4.46. Gold up $32, rallying nicely today, 32.10. Silver's up 19. Platinum's up 6. Palladium is up 15. So that's your market cap of the day. But we want to get back to Bobby. And, the great thing with Bobby is this is how long he's been involved in this. Before anybody had ever heard of Bitcoin. I know our audience, listen, you guys we tell you the stories about Jekyll Island. You know what happened with the bankers. We also talked, of that Liberty Dollar, what happened there, right? They don't want anybody to be able to compete. They don't want free money. And, it's just like today. Everyone, Jay Powell's going to say something today. We shouldn't have to worry about our money by one guy making one comment or another. But this is the banking cartel that we're in. And Bobby saw his opportunity with Bitcoin and the rest. Bobby, you saw a path.
Yeah, and it was long and twisted. It wasn't, a real simple set of dots. But, once you discover that there's something wrong with the money and that there's a concerted, specific, dedicated effort to destroy it, like people mention from time to time, like, well, the dollar hasn't died. I mean, it's not that bad, right? And it's like, well, hold on a second here. Let's look at how far that dollar that came out in 1913 actually stretches today. That cup of coffee that was 5 cents back in 1913 is almost $5 today. That means the dollar has lost 99% of its purchasing power over the last, 112 years? Like, how much more dead can you get before people wake up and say, hey, we've got a problem with our money? And when you think about it, it's not that strange because every other paper currency in the history of mankind has failed. It's just a matter of time. It usually happens quite rapidly when you see, hyperinflation happen in the Weimar Republic or like in Zimbabwe. It's real over the top and you can identify it, notice it, see it happening real time. But when it happens over 100 years, that slow inflation tax kind of just creeps in and gets deeper and deeper. So it becomes a part of life. I mean, we've all just come to accept that things are going to be more expensive next year. We're going to have to work a little harder next year. We're going to get a little less for it next year. Maybe we'll have to pick up an extra shift to make ends meet next year. And it's just something that for some reason we've accepted as being part of life. Death, taxes, and inflation. Like, we have to rethink that phrase, because we've come to just accept the idea that money, it becomes less and less valuable over time. And of course, that couldn't be further from the truth. It's not money that becomes less valuable. It's the Federal Reserve note. It's fiat currency. It's any kind of currency that is manipulated by a third party that has an obvious incentive to make sure that you're so busy trying to figure out how to like keep your head above water that you can't take a minute and question what they're doing, or how they're doing it, or what game of political football they're playing. Like, as long as we're so busy just trying to stay alive and feed our families, there's no time or opportunity to dig into what's really happening behind the curtain. And so, this is all part of a very specific and engineered plan. What's fun is that people are waking up in massive numbers. They're paying attention. They're seeing that problem. It's gone so far that you've reached the breaking point. And I think what's happening today, kind of jumping all the way over to the finish line here in the conversation, is that cryptocurrency has shown us how we actually have the tools at our disposal now, today, after all these years, to actually give central banks a run for their money. And, gold and silver have worked as money for a very, very long time. But as society continues to evolve, become more complex, global trade, internet, digital stuff, I mean, it's real tough to use gold and silver coin as a currency in today's, high-tech digital world. And so that was the path that I was on for a very long time. And it took me years to accept that, to come to that conclusion. So I don't expect anyone to take that jump over that gigantic hurdle overnight, or even on a couple hours of chat time. But that's what happened over the last 12 years of my life. I started out with manufacturing my own gold, silver, copper coins as my way of doing something about this money problem. And I ended up where I am today as the founder of TEXTITcoin, which I could not be more proud of. So there's a lot to unpack in that journey as well. We'll get to it if and when you guys want. But that's what happened.
Yes.
A realization that something is wrong with money. Somebody's got to do something about it, and I'm that guy.
There you go. So I tell this story, and you guys know I've been on the air a long time. And I always told the story when I was like, hey, I'm going to tell my buddies I'm getting into the gold and silver business. And their response, why would you want to do that? Who wants gold? Who wants silver? Right? And this is 2003. Now today, anybody that finds out I'm in the gold business, they want to talk to me. They, like Bobby said, people are waking up to the fact that, hey, our money's been hijacked, we're getting ripped off, and we need to find a way to be able to outpace what they're doing and eventually try to find, Jason, how many times do we say it? The problem is the Federal Reserve. Until we get somebody in there that says, let's get rid of the Fed, this problem is going to continue. And I love what Bobby said, which is, hey, gold and silver is going to be hard to do, especially in this digital era that we're in. And maybe the cryptos can finally present a real threat and a real challenge to our central banks. And that's why we keep talking about it. This is why we want people to get in on it. But, Bobby, let's get to Texit. So you decide, hey, I'm going to take the plunge. Why Texit, and what was your goal in creating this?
Well, it took a long time, like I mentioned, to finally convince myself to go all in on crypto. And you got to remember that I'm not new to crypto. I made the original Bitcoin coin back in 2012. You know, that coin that's got the B in the middle of it. Probably the most famous coin in the world today. It's like the quintessential representation of all things, not just Bitcoin, but cryptocurrency in general. Like, that coin I brought that to market. I own the copyright for that coin. I did it in 2012 back before most people ever heard of Bitcoin. I did it the same year that I testified in U.S. Congress about alternative and parallel currencies. So I've been around this cryptocurrency conversation for a long time. Never got in till quite recently, but I've been around it. I've been studying it. I've been skeptical of it. I've been curious about it. And when I finally sold my last coin factory mid-2023, and I knew I was getting completely out of coin manufacturing and going all in on crypto, I didn't know exactly which crypto I was going to throw my hat in the ring for. You look at the ones that are out there. You got Bitcoin, you got Ethereum, you've got Litecoin, you've got Bitcoin Cash, you've got, thousands and thousands of options and thousands more getting cooked up every day. So it's like, well, which one are we talking about here? I started studying and come to find out, which I think most people don't even know, that most crypto today is now controlled by Asia, China specifically. And look, this is not a problem for me because I lived in Asia for 7 years. I understand Asian culture very well, and I know why it's happening that way. But the point is that if you look at the different types of cryptocurrencies that are out there, you've got two major categories. You've got what we call proof of work, and you've got proof of stake. And when you look at both categories and you look at who's the dominant player in both of those categories, you find out that it's Asia. 60% of all crypto trading is Japan, Korea, China. More than 50% of all crypto mining is in China. And I said, this is odd. I know I'm going in on crypto. I know I'm going to figure it out. I don't know what it is yet, but it's really odd that crypto is now almost primarily controlled by Asia. And so when I figured that out, that's when I decided that it was time to cook up to create a unique American, made crypto, something that was built here, specifically mined here, controlled by us here. And that's when I said, well, Texas has got great power. It's got great culture. It's got its own story. The Western, rugged, independent spirit of Texans is well known across the world. When I was living in Asia, if I told people where I was from, they could only name 2 U.S. states. Usually it's California and Texas. And so the whole world knows the Texas story. And so we've got a really unique advantage here with our own power grid and our own abundant supply of electricity. And so I decided that we would create TEXTITcoin because all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this concept of Texit is entering the national discussion as well. We've got crisis at the border. We've got an economy now that's really driving the whole country. We've got, all these things that make Texas unique. And as we look at this American empire, heading towards the cliff, the question in my mind was, will Texas go down with the ship? And of course, I think the answer to that is no. We're setting up our own stock exchange here in Texas for the first time off Wall Street ever. We're just, the writing is on the wall that Texas is going to be independent at some point. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen tomorrow or if it's going to happen in our lifetime, but you and I both know that every empire in the history of mankind has failed. It's only a matter of time. That's sad, but cleansing in some ways as well. And if and when that happens, Texas is going to need its own money. And who better equipped than me to establish an alternative, voluntary, complementary currency in and for the state and the people of Texas than me? I don't think there's any other person on planet Earth. Now, when I was in my coin days, my gold, silver coin days, I would have, started designing a new medallion, a 1-ounce silver round, make some in gold and copper, and I would have worked on establishing, a precious metals currency. But not in 2023. I said, nope, this is going to be my venture finally into crypto. I've got it figured out. I've got enough knowledge, experience. I've learned from the things that have gone horribly wrong in my world and in other worlds. And this is my opportunity to not throw my hat in the ring of some other crypto that's controlled primarily by China, but to create a unique American version of crypto that's going to be mined exclusively here in the state of Texas. And that's where TEXTITcoin came into existence. I mined the first block January 26, 2024, after a couple months of R&D. And it's been a kind of a magical thing ever since then. But that's how we got to the spot where I am today with TEXTITcoin.
So obviously, some people out there will be like, oh, well, this is just for Texas. then why should we do something that's just for Texas? Kind of explain how this works.
Yeah, so we get that from time to time, and the conversation is definitely different when you're outside of Texas. Now, Texas has got enough people, enough population, enough power to have its own crypto coin, its own mining data centers. So there's enough here for us to exclusively build it, by Texans, just from our own thing. But we want to invite the rest of the world to participate with us as well. And our focus is primarily outside of Texas and with our American friends. And then we have an invitation to the rest of the world as well. And the reason for that is because we want to trade with everybody. We're building something here. And rule number one is that our digital mines, the infrastructure that actually keeps track of the records and the transactions, the blockchain, the balances, all that stuff. The first rule is that can only be built and deployed here in Texas. So that gives us ultimate control inside of our, state geographic boundaries for this here. But we want to trade with everyone. And so we know that if people are going to want to trade with us, they're going to have some skin in the game as well. They should have a vested interest, and that's why it's open to other Americans and also people around the world. We'll talk more about that in a minute.
Yeah, you're listening to Bobby Gray. He's our guest here on the Patriot Radio News Hour. He's going to stick with us into the Half Empty Cup of Joe. We got a lot more coming. Stay with us.
We're back here, it's Patriot Radio News Hour, still not the half-empty cup yet. Joe and Jason, we got our guest Bobby Gray with us, and we're getting into the good stuff now. So Bobby was kind of laying things out. One of the things you said early on was, hey, the problem that you saw with the cryptos that everyone's heard of on TV and a bunch of them that no one's ever heard of, it's really all the mining, all the control is done somewhere else. It's not here in the United States. And so you've set this up to where, hey, if it's going to be mined, it's got to be mined in Texas. And I think some people would say, well, in that case, if you're restricting the mining, is it really decentralized?
Yeah. Look, there's an element of centralization to every crypto that's out there. When you think about Bitcoin, you say, well, this is decentralized currency. Then you realize that the majority of the mining is controlled by about 4 or 5 people who sit up on stage at these big crypto events from time to time and talk about decentralization. You talk about the core development team of Bitcoin that is the only group of people that have access to publishing code changes to the Bitcoin, technology itself. And so you're always going to have a dichotomy between the understanding of what nodes are and what mines are and how they're distributed in a fashion that eliminates the need for like the traditional mainframe computer. So when we think of decentralized, let's take a step back first and say, okay, the centralized format is like Chase or Bank of America, right? You've got a supercomputer inside of some massive glass building somewhere, and it's got the laser beams that you got to like climb through in order to get in there and hack it and steal all the money. So that's the traditional centralized banking model, where there's one computer, it's obviously a good computer and it's probably very well backed up and redundant, but there's a central authority that has access to those records that are stored on that computer. This central authority has got the ability to change your balance, or they've got the ability to disconnect your access to it. And so when we think of centralized versus decentralized currency, that's really what's at stake. What's at stake is that the databases and the records, the transaction history in blockchain, like Bitcoin, for example, is distributed across millions of computers all over the world. And so what you're doing is you're eliminating that central choke point that has the ability to turn individual access on and off, and you're replacing that central authority with a decentralized network. Who controls that decentralized network? It's really controlled by the miners. Now, the miners are the ones that are listening for transactions, and they're the ones that are building the blockchain. So every 10 minutes, let's use Bitcoin as an example. Every 10 minutes, a new block of transactions is formed. So these miners are listening for transactions to happen on the network. They take those transactions and they crunch them into a block. Exactly how that process takes place, what goes into the algorithms of these ever-increasing exotic math equations, I can't really explain, but the point is that they're bundling all these transactions into a block. As soon as 51% of the miners in that community agree on what the transactions are that go into the block is formed, it's accepted by the network, and the chain continues. And so in crypto, what you have is what's called a 51% attack. If 51% of the mining community agrees on a specific transaction, it becomes part of the record. And so what you're watching out for is, does any one group have more than 51% control of the mine? And that's exactly what we have today. And it's very easy to verify and prove when you go on the internet and search for who controls Bitcoin mining. You can see where all those mining farms are. You can see who controls the big ones. And you can see very quickly that more than 50% of that, more than 51% of that right now is in China. And so whether it's a decentralized community of miners that are all controlled by 3 or 4 or 5 companies or individuals, or it's a code base that's controlled by 3 or 4 or 5 individuals that determines whether or not Bitcoin improves or changes in going into the future, there's always going to be a centralization of control and authority that's misunderstood when we think about crypto and you hear, the basic talking points like crypto is decentralized, not right. Any one person controls it. Okay.
Right. Like Bitcoin, they want you to believe there's thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, people are mining it all over the world. But really what you're saying is, no, really what happened is there's just a handful of really big players, right, and they dominate it.
Yes, and we're talking about foreign nations, China specifically, and we're talking about mega corporations. We're talking about the same types of institutions that Bitcoin set out to disrupt back when it started in 2008, 2009. So, and the other thing that people say that's untrue in crypto is that Bitcoin is private, and that couldn't be further from the truth. What we get with decentralized computing technology and what we get with, this public ledger is full transparency. What we don't have is exactly who owns each individual wallet, but, the systems out there and the AI now is smart enough to really figure out who's in control of the various wallets. And so crypto today, Bitcoin today specifically, is not nearly as private as you'd like to think. So we've got some of these things that, sure, that they are really easy talking points that we accept at face value, but when you dig into them, they're not entirely true. And the same thing can be said today for TEXTITcoin. The reality of TEXTITcoin is, yes, we're building a decentralized mining network, but there's one guy right now that controls it, and that one guy is me. So the question you have to ask yourself, and that's obviously a risk, we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, in a little bit, but the question you have to ask yourself is, who do you want at the helm of your decentralized cryptocurrency? Do you want a foreign nation, China? Do you want the central banks and the megacorps, or do you want a guy that's been committed to the cause of honest money for the last 17 years, sitting there helping keep the protocol, the technology, the mission, the vision, the strategy pointed towards a solution that actually delivers on that original Bitcoin white paper's promise of digital, decentralized, peer-to-peer currency that was set out in 2008 by, quote-unquote, Satoshi Nakamoto. And so today, yes, it's very centralized, as all the rest of the cryptocurrencies are. The mining, which is intended to be spread throughout the state of Texas, both in data centers and in miners' homes, which is phase 2 for the mining operation, those things all give us redundancy and reliability, and that infrastructure, like we mentioned, is only going to be built in the state of Texas. But still, we need to have a group of people, whether it's a foundation or a team, that are committed to honest money, that are keeping it put in the right direction.
We'll be back with more with Bobby Gray and TEXTITcoin. Stay with us. We got the big parts coming up next. back here, Joe and Jason with Bobby Gray. 800-951-0592. That is your toll-free number if you want to purchase gold and silver. If you want to get in on TextIt, we can sign you up. It's fast. It's easy. It only takes a few minutes, and we can do it right over the phone. You can obviously come to the office, Colorado tonight, a big meeting there where they're going to be signing people up, answering questions, getting more details. But we got the head guy. We've got the guy with us. Now, Bobby, I'm going to ask you to try to be real quick here. We got a couple more hours after this, and we can dive into things. But one of your solutions for the Bitcoin problem is, number one, how much foreign interest is allowed in the mining side of it?
We've got a hard cap at 10%.
So that's the most the foreign participation can be. Is this also why you set it up to where, hey, you can't come in with $100,000, $1 million, $10 million of mining share because then it's going to, that 51 attack, as you called it, that makes you vulnerable to that.
No, that's actually a totally different issue with the hard cap, with the buy-in limit. And we don't really have ourselves exposed to the 51% attack because our mine is permissioned, meaning that you can't get access to even mine it unless you're authorized to do so, and no one's authorized to do it outside of our mining pool. And so just to touch for a real quick moment about the cap is because we want a level playing field. And because what we're doing isn't just building a mine. Any rich guy can build a mine. What we're doing is we're building a community. We're building a movement. And where you have to start is you have to understand that there's really no playbook on how to launch your own currency. There wasn't a playbook for it back in 2008 when I started the American Open Currency Standard, and there wasn't a playbook for it today. I mean, I'm sure plenty of people have written articles and technical documentation about how to launch your own meme coin. But what we're talking about is how to launch a currency. And the fundamental component at the core of that question is the basic misunderstanding about a cryptocurrency or a currency isn't necessarily a code base or a series of 0 and 1s. What a currency is at its core is just a promise. A currency is a commitment between producers and consumers and traders that they're going to be able and willing to exchange something later for something that they determine to be valuable, right? I don't know if that makes any sense. Let me see if I can say it again. A currency is just a promise. And whether we use a paper clip as our currency or a piece of paper with, some president's picture on it, or we use a bar of gold or silver, or we use something totally unique and new and different like crypto, a currency is simply a promise. That's all it is. And so what we have to do in order to keep that promise is to expand a community of people that are interested in participating, and that community engages it based on their understanding of the rules that govern that currency. And so really there's a governance system that's set out that says nobody can buy more than X, and we can only mine it here, and this and that and the other thing. And so when you set those rules, you make a promise. And you say to the people that join the community, here are our rules. Would you like to trade with us? We use this little digital zeros and ones thing on an app called the TXC wallet to exchange value inside of our community. And as our community gets bigger, as that promise becomes stronger, the value of that TXC goes up. That's how it's supposed to work, where the power of the community, the size of the community, the things that are produced by and for that community, as that increases and becomes larger, more diverse, you would expect that the currency would become more valuable. That's how it always works. And so what we're doing is we're not just building a mine. We're not just building out the data center. Anybody can do that. What we're doing is we're building a community. We're building a community of people that want to do something different, that like the idea of an honest, fast currency, that like the idea of, having that being started by somebody that's got a multi-decade commitment to the ideals of honest money.
So Bobby, really quick, let me jump in. I want to say that, I haven't covered this in a while with our audience, but the idea of cryptocurrencies, believe it or not, this is something that's already happened in history, just not on a digital scale. And Bobby, whether you know this or not, I'll just let you know. So a big question I try to ask people is, well, how did Great Britain become the most powerful nation on the planet? How did that happen? And the history tells us that after the Dark Ages were still running, and all you had was the lords and peasants. You had no working class, business class. England came up with a new monetary system, a new currency. It was the tally stick. The tally stick was used where you split a branch, and every tree branch is unique. So the borrower and the lender each had one half of this. This is where the term stock came from. The lender had the stock, and these notches were put on the tally sticks. And this became an honest money form that made Great Britain the most powerful nation on earth. They don't teach it in the history books because central banking doesn't want you to know that if you come up with an independent currency, an island nation can suddenly become the most powerful nation on earth. What Bobby is offering through this blockchain that's operated in America through Texas, it very well could just repeat history if the financial collapse of the rest of the world continues on and there's a very solid currency being taken care of in the right way in Texas, Bobby. So I got other examples we'll talk about later in the next show, but what you're doing and what blockchain wants to do is,
if you can export to the world something that they can use to keep track of trade and do it honestly, then the world is going to flock to that. And so, you see that happen in so many different things. And you see what happens when that promise is broken, like in 1933 with the gold confiscation.
Absolutely. We're coming right back. We got one more segment on the Patriot Radio News Hour. We got Bobby Gray, who will stick with us into the half-empty cup of Joe. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Joe and Jason, along with our guest Bobby Gray from Texit, the TEXTITcoin founder, with us today. He'll be with us on the half-empty cup as well. So those of you in Arizona, if you want to jump over to 1360khnc.com, you can listen live. Both of these shows are podcasted, so you can always get those shows at 1360khnc.com, so you can listen to all 3 hours in their entirety. But really quickly, Bobby, besides, so we've got, as we know, hey, these people like us, we're tired of this corrupt money system, and we're viewing this as an opportunity to really make a change, right? Force change from within. We can't get our elected officials, we can't wait for them to pull their heads out of their ass to figure it out, right? We're going to institute the change. But who else? Who else is going to be buying TEXTITcoin? Are you working with communities to do things like, hey, let us help you run your local town event or something like that? What's the next phase of use for Texit?
Yeah, so we're off to a great start with building the mine. And remember, the challenge with establishing a reputable cryptocurrency, when especially you're talking about something like proof of work, meaning you're building the mine, you have to have the mine big enough where the world looks at it and they take you seriously. If you're mining your own crypto on a laptop that's sitting on a chair in your sister's basement, the world's not going to like it. They're not going to trust it. They're not going to use it. And when they use that network, that's what we call layer 2. And so the mine is layer 1. The mine and the blocks that it produces and the reward that comes out of each one of those blocks, that's what we think of as layer 1. Layer 2 is the world looking at the mine and saying, man, that thing is big, it's powerful, it's redundant, it's reputable, it's geographically diversified, it's got all the right stuff going on so that we can actually build our apps and our dApps and our digital solutions on top of your infrastructure and have a high level of confidence that that infrastructure is safe and is going to be able to do a good job of record keeping. That's what the mine does. That's what the infrastructure does. Now, everything that happens after that is what we think of as either layer 2 or phase 2 for us. So phase 2 is to actually, like we said before, get people to start using the alternative currency. But of course, it's easier said than done because everyone's so familiar with the tools that they've been using for the last 20, 30, 40 years, whether it's writing a check or it's using your ATM debit card or it's a credit card or it's a tap to pay or it's a Zelle or a Venmo or a Cash App. I mean, these are the what we call flexible, elastic money tools of our time. And so what we have to do is give people an incentive to consider changing their behavior. Now, that's an uphill battle. And so we'll wrestle with that as we get into what we call our downtown digital dollars, which is a layer 2 that's built on top of the TXC blockchain, the TEXTITcoin blockchain, the Made in America, built exclusively in Texas blockchain. So we're excited about that. But this is where my background and experience really comes into play, the part that I'm excited about the most, because I'm the one guy on planet Earth that actually knows how to do that. I'm the guy that knows how to get people to use an alternative currency, and it's actually a lot easier than you would think.
800-951-0592. Get signed up. The mine, I'll just tell you right now, they're setting record sign-ups day in and day out. Give us a call. We'll get you set up. We're going to be right back with more